Hi there, ladies and gents. It's Dan from Adventure More UK. Welcome to another episode of my podcast. Today's special guest is a bronze medalist at the Paralympic Games in London 2012. He's also a US Marine Corps veteran. The man is Mr. Rob Jones. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Like I said before, obviously I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, yeah, I
Obviously,
appreciate you giving me the opportunity. It's a real honor to meet you.
yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. Like I said, we're both veterans, of different countries.
Hmm.
Obviously, as I said, you're in the US Marine Corps. I was in the British Army, but I feel like there's definitely a connection no matter what country you've been, your country you've served, and I feel like that's something that you can talk. I've talked to US. I had a Ray Kashkar, who's a US Navy SEAL. I've had guys who are Danish officers who I was attached to when I was in Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and I've obviously worked with the British as well, and Lithuanians, Italians. I was quite a lot of people. So I feel like there's always going to be a connection there, no matter where you're from. Um,
Yeah.
so first thing I want to talk about is sort of pre-military. So before you joined the military, before you joined the U.S. Marine Corps, what was life like for you?
Well, I grew up on a horse farm in Virginia. Pretty normal childhood. Chores relating to picking up horse poop and weed whacking and doing stuff like that on the farm, and then went to a school over here in Virginia called Virginia Tech. I
Okay,
actually started in computer science, and I wasn't a very good student at Virginia Tech, and so by my third year, um, I wasn't. I might have been failing. I'm not sure. I wasn't doing very well in my grades, and so I recognized that I was probably going to have to go to school for longer than 4 years if I wanted to graduate in computer science. And
okay,
this kind of sent me on a soul searching trip in my junior year. I was feeling kind of isolated and lonely. I didn't have a whole lot of friends and feeling down about myself. And I read this book called Brotherhood of Heroes about the Battle of Peleliu in World War II, which is a
okay.
famous Marine Corps battle. And yeah, it just kind of struck a chord with me and made me recognize these things that I was missing from my life that were um, leaving these holes were things like courage and brotherhood and selflessness. And so I figured the best way for me to go find those missing pieces in my life was to join the Marine Corps, and so that's what I did.
Yeah, that's cool. So was there any other members of your family that joined the Marine Corps or any other military establishment?
No Marines, to my knowledge. My dad was drafted in Vietnam in the Army, but
Okay,
he didn't go to Vietnam. We didn't. It wasn't really a big. Didn't play a big role in our relationship or anything. So yeah, well, I didn't really come from much of a military family or anything. It's just I had a couple friends that joined the Marine Corps, and that's why I read that book.
yeah,
So it's kind of lucky in that regard. And then yeah, I just so happened to find that book in the Marine Corps at the right time in my life.
yeah. Yeah. How did your family feel about joining the military?
They were very surprised because I wasn't really what you would call a person that you would expect to be joining the military. I was kind of a computer nerd, played a lot of video games and that kind of thing. So yeah, they were very surprised, and obviously my mom and my dad were very scared at the same time because I joined in 2006, and as you probably know, the battle over Mahdi was going on in Iraq, and we were still in Afghanistan, so there was a lot of war still going on at that time. So
Yeah,
that's going to scare a parent when their child joins the military during the height of a war.
yeah, absolutely. And you say that you obviously studied computer science at school, at high school,
Hmm.
but you actually joined as a combat engineer, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and that's kind of a matter of circumstance. I mean, I changed my major after I joined the Marine Corps because my original plan was to be an officer, and in order to be an
Okay,
officer, you have to have a degree, and I just wanted to get to war as soon as I possibly could. So I changed my major from computer science to interdisciplinary studies. It was the only one that I could finish in 4 years. So it was the one that got me out of college and got me the degree that I was going to need to go to OCS. Um, and so as a part of that process, I wanted to be a Marine before I joined the Marine Corps, because that would look better on my application to be an officer if I had some experience. And so I joined the local reserve unit, and that reserve unit was a combat engineer, and all they had was combat engineer billets available.
Okay.
So it was kind of a matter of circumstance, and I got pretty lucky in that particular unit was a combat engineer unit that dealt with explosives and mine detection and IED detection, as opposed to a combat engineer unit that would have been more towards the construction and airport maintenance side of things, because those are also possibilities when you join as a combat engineer.
Yeah.
So I got really lucky in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, how long is your training in total up until you qualify as a combat engineer?
The total amount of training would be 13 weeks of boot camp, where you learn how to be what they call a basically trained Marine. And then from there, a combat engineer would do 3 weeks of Marine combat training, where you kind of learn the very, very basics of infantry tactics. And then from there, it's another, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. I don't remember exactly. 6 to 8 weeks of combat engineer school, where you learn, again, the basics of combat engineering. So you learn everything from construction to mine detection to demolitions during that time period. And
Okay.
then there's even
So
at that point, since we were kind of responsible for the IED threat as well, they did a little section about IED detection.
okay. So is it kind of continual? Like, so once you join your battalion or whatever it is you join, is it continual training and learning, or is it kind of like that's what you do and then that's it?
Yeah, pretty much it's continual training. So I was a reservist, and I think you all probably have a pretty similar system there, where as a reservist you go into your reserve unit one weekend every month
Mm.
for training. Now, if I had gone active duty they spend basically Monday to Friday training, doing their
Yeah.
job and learning. So as an active duty person, I would have done a lot more training. But yeah, it's continual training to get better and better, and preparing for the inevitable deployment, so that you are in the highest state of readiness as you possibly can be as a unit.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And your first tour was in Iraq, wasn't it, in 2008?
Yeah, Habbaniyah, Iraq in 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your role different to, well, because we'll talk about Afghanistan a little bit afterwards, but with Iraq, was it similar or different? What was it you actually did over there?
Similar and different. Iraq in 2008 had died down a lot, especially Habbaniyah. So Habbaniyah was relatively a safe area at that point, and so the role had shifted from, in the clear hold build strategy, we were pretty solid in the build portion of that, and so as part of the build portion in Habbaniyah in 2008, the combat engineers were, and my unit was responsible for a lot of building Iraqi police stations, and then
Okay.
basically our job was to return a a confidence in the populace to the Iraqi government, and then also help them to feel safe, or feel that they were safe from Al Qaeda and quote unquote the bad guys, terrorists.
Yeah, yeah,
And so as a
yeah,
part
yeah,
of that, we helped to build the Iraqi police infrastructure, which involved building Iraqi police stations, and helping solidify those. And then also part of our role was to remove IEDs if there were any, and then also remove weapons caches that were in the area. And so that's what I spent most of my time doing, was the cache removal role. And so what that would equate to was the infantry platoon that we were attached to. I would usually be out there with two. Me and one other combat engineer would be attached to an infantry platoon out in a forward operating base, and they would get an intelligence from the local populace. Hey, there's a weapons cache buried in this vacant lot, for example, or along this river, or along this road. And we would go out there, set up security, and then me and the other combat engineer would sweep that area with our metal detector to try and find the munitions. And
Yep.
once we swept that area, if we found something, we would dig it up and kind of stack it, and then explosive ordnance disposal would come and take it away or do whatever they wanted to do with it. A lot of the times they just blow it in place if it was safe. And if there wasn't anything there, well, we cleared that area. And so that was kind of what we did for 7 months straight, was just kind of do that over and over again and just help to reestablish that sense of security in the civilian populace.
Yeah. Okay. So with Iraq now, just from my personal point of view, my Iraq tour was a lot different to when I was in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So and obviously I was a radio operator. That was my job. I was in the Royal Signals, which is, I'm sure you have your own signal operators or radio operators, specialists. When you were in Iraq, what rank were you at, and what was your sort of like responsibilities?
I was a lance corporal in Iraq, so that's the third rank from the bottom. Private first class, then lance corporal in the Marine Corps. And yeah, I was just a team member. I didn't really have any responsibilities besides, do what I'm told by my team leader. I would get sent to do sweeps on my own and with another lance corporal, where I was senior to that other lance corporal. But really, it's just me and one other guy, so there wasn't a whole lot of leadership responsibilities besides just doing our job, which was, sweeping these areas once the infantry guys kind of told us it was safe and good to go, that they had security set up. So that was pretty much the that was pretty much my responsibility in Iraq.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me on to 2010. So 2010 is when you went to Afghanistan, I believe. So obviously before your incident, because we'll talk a bit about that if that's okay. What was it? Was it a similar role, or was it a bit different then? While she was in Afghanistan.
Well, I say similar but different because the similarities are that we are we're searching the ground for metal with a metal detector, and that's kind of why in Iraq we had the cache sweeping role, and in Afghanistan and in Iraq too we had the IED detection role, but there just weren't a whole lot of IEDs where I was. So if I'd been in Iraq in 2006 in Habbaniyah, where it was a lot more kinetic, then I would have probably been trying to find a lot more IEDs. But we were trained to use the metal detectors and find mines and that kind of thing. So that's why we had both jobs in Iraq and Afghanistan. But in Afghanistan, there aren't really a whole lot of weapons caches because most of the IEDs that they use were made from homemade explosives. So there just weren't really very many weapons caches to find. And also in 2010 in Afghanistan, the war was picking back up there, and so there were a lot more IEDs. There was a lot more terrorist and Taliban activity. And so in Afghanistan, my role was pretty similar in that I was a team leader, but at the same time, I would usually get attached by myself or with one other guy to an infantry platoon or an infantry squad. So it would just be me and him, and I wouldn't have much of a leadership role in the patrol. Where my job there would be to go along with these infantry patrols, and whenever they came to an area that we figured there's a good chance that there's an IED up here, so like for example crossing a bridge, I would go across the bridge first and make sure there weren't any IEDs in that general danger area, and then mark my path. And then once I got across, then everybody else would follow my little path across, and we would continue. So it'd be IED detection in that sense.
Yeah. Like I said, for instance, like going back to sort of the similarities and the differences, like my Iraq tour, I spent a lot of time with what's called JHC, which is the Joint Helicopter Command, which is which is a mixture of Danish, US, and British. So I used to work with the British Apaches, the US Apaches. I also spent a bit of time down in Arif Jan, down in Kuwait, which is the big base down there. But then when you go to, I think, places like Afghanistan, I was attached to a Danish infantry unit where I was the signaller on the ground. Because I don't know if it's similar for yourself, but we had a mixture of Danish and British, and like I said, there's a small minority of, I think there was Lithuanians and Macedonians that were all mixed together in the same area. I don't know if that's. Did you ever work with other nationalities while you were in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so when we were in Afghanistan, we started in a place called Delaram, and so when we moved 3 months into our deployment, the Georgian Army took our area of operations, and then we went and
Okay.
took over from British Army and Royal Marines in Sangin,
Okay.
Afghanistan. So we
Right.
worked with
Yeah.
them as well during that time period.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's in Helmand, isn't it? It's like Sangin. Sangin's in Helmand.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like you say, like because you actually probably would have been in Afghanistan the same time as me. I went to Afghan in March 2010. So
Hmm.
up until October 2010.
Yeah,
So
exact same time.
yeah. So just want to bring it on to, so in July. So it would have been what, July 22nd. That was
Hmm.
obviously probably quite a pinnacle sort of moment in your life. For
Hmm.
people that don't know, but most people won't know that listen to my podcast. Is it okay if you explain what happened on that day?
Yeah, so what we were doing, what we had taken over from the area of operations in Sangin from British Army Royal Marines. Um, and what we were doing was taking their foothold that they had established and then pushing it out further, making it bigger. And we wanted to expand the area that we controlled all the way from this place called Fob Inkerman all the way to the Helmand River. And so the way that we were doing that was by doing pushes into Taliban territory. So we basically would just walk into Taliban territory, let them shoot at us, we'd shoot back, kill them, or they'd run away or whatever. And then we would seize compounds, sweep them, make sure there weren't any booby traps in them, and then set them up as forward operating bases, and then
Okay.
use those as to do security patrols and kind of recenter ourselves, resupply ourselves, and then do another push. And like we're going to keep doing that until we reached our basically limit of our area of operations. And so we did one of those pushes, and then on the day of the second push was July 22nd. And so I was sent out again with an infantry squad as a part of this push. There were kind of squads and platoons going all over the place, and basically what I was doing was acting as the IED specialist for this. Let's see, first squad of third platoon of Kilo Company of Third Battalion, 7th Marines, and at some point around 1 o'clock on that day, we our point man actually stepped on an IED, and so luckily the IED that he stepped on malfunctioned and did what's called a low order detonation, where only a very, very small amount of it went off. So it was basically a little firecracker went off next to him. And so he was uninjured. But in that situation, where there's one IED, as you know, there's going to be two, three, or four, because they like to cluster them for maximum effect. And so that basically became an area that we knew there was probably going to be another IED in there. So then I stepped into my role to guide us through the area, um, guide us through basically what was essentially a mini minefield. Is a good way to visualize it. And so I got my metal detector out and started moving through that area. And on that particular day, my luck ran out, and I stepped on an IED that worked correctly, and that severed both of my legs above the knee.
Okay. And do you remember much from it, or was it complete darkness? Do you remember?
No, I remember most. The only I don't remember the actual stepping. I remember taking a step and then blacking out and then waking up, up seemingly in an instant. Um, but it was probably more like 20, 25 seconds later that I woke back up. So I was knocked unconscious for that short period. And so, yeah, I remember everything from waking up after that. I was still, my fellow Marines still hadn't even gotten to me. Um,
Okay.
and so I woke up and it was about what you would expect, screaming, a lot of blood, that kind of thing. My fellow Marines yelling to me that they were coming. They can't immediately just come over because there's probably a third IED in there somewhere. So they have to
Yeah.
get another combat engineer to come over, sweep to me, and then at that point, then they can start rendering aid. So they put tourniquets on my legs, and they called in a helicopter, which was a British helicopter, by the way. So maybe you
Yeah.
might have even helped get that
Yeah.
bird to me.
Would it have been
Um,
a British Chinook?
yeah, yeah. So that's exactly.
Yeah.
I don't remember actually being loaded on the helicopter. I kind of it was an RAF bird, so I don't know if that you would have been
Mm.
involved with RAF
Mm.
logistics and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
but maybe you would have played a role in that. But yeah, so they applied the tourniquets. The corpsman gave me some morphine, and then they loaded me up onto a stretcher, and they took that stretcher to a tank. And at that point, that's when they gave me another shot of something that made me unconscious. And then that tank presumably went and met the helicopter, and the helicopter took me to Camp Bastion or Camp Leatherneck. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. 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 Yes. It's just an area of Camp Bastion, isn't it, where
Yeah.
you guys are, where the US are. So what was your process from obviously getting to Camp Bastion? Do you remember much about getting back to the US, or was that quite a blur as well?
I only woke up once during that time period in Germany in Landstuhl,
Okay.
and it was very briefly. I knew that I had lost, at that point, I had actually thought that I had lost my legs below the knee because at site of injury, they were, at least the other Marines that were there told me they were slightly below the knee. But I wake up in Germany to find out that they had to be amputated above the knee. And I was pretty out of it. I mean, I only remember my squad leader telling me that I'd stepped on an IED, lost both legs above the knee, and then basically I got transferred to Bethesda, Maryland. Um, and I think I was from site of injury to Bethesda within 3 or 4 days. But I only
Okay.
woke up that one time, so I don't remember
Okay.
much of that
Was that?
process. And the next time after I woke up in Germany, the next time I woke up was being rolled out of the ambulance at camp or at Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland.
Is that Walter Reed?
It is now. At the time, it wasn't, but the two bases
Okay.
combined, the two hospitals combined, and so now it's Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. But when I got there
Yeah.
originally, it was Bethesda Naval Hospital or National Naval
Uh,
Medical Center or something like that.
okay. Okay. So obviously, from the time of which you returned back to the US to making what I would call a recovery, a full recovery. How
Hmm.
long was the process of like recovery and rehab and stuff like that?
I mean, recovery is kind of ongoing. There's certain parts of
Yeah.
my life I'm still working on recovery. It's just, as you get closer to 100%, it's a lot harder to get that extra 0.1%. But I was probably back mostly recovered within uh, 13, 14 months. I was walking everywhere I went with bionic knees. I was running again. Hadn't quite learned how to ride a bicycle again, but I was pretty close. I was rowing, so I was like kind of past the point of recovering my strength, and I was regaining strength and becoming stronger. Um, so I'd say, within about a little over a year, I was pretty much what I would call recovered, and then I retired after 18 months, mostly
Yeah.
because it just takes a while to do the paperwork to get you have to get your medical board where they determine whether or not you're fit or unfit for duty, and then you have to decide if you retire, and then you have to do all these classes to retire. It just takes time to
Mm.
process all the paperwork.
Yeah. So obviously that was in 2011 when you left.
Yeah, I
When you left
retired
the
officially
military.
December of 2011.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's something when I was looking into like for yourself, like obviously you received a Purple Heart, obviously,
Hmm.
and for people that don't know what the Purple Heart is, it's basically for someone who was killed or injured, wounded in obviously in operational tour, on an
Mm-hmm.
operational tour, and obviously it's just it's US only. It's something I actually didn't realise until only a couple of weeks ago. Is that when I was doing a little bit of research into yourself, is that we don't have an equivalent in the UK, I believe. People might want to correct me, but I believe we don't have an equivalent. We don't have. I believe I read an article that Prince Harry was trying to have basically getting some system that we were awarded the same equivalent, like as a Purple Heart, but as a British sort of equivalent. So it's something I didn't realise we didn't have. Like, so we don't have what you would call your Purple Heart. So that was something that I found quite interesting.
Yeah, it's very
So
interesting.
yeah,
I mean, the Purple Heart is our oldest. It's our oldest medal. It was the only medal we gave out for a while. George Washington created it back in the Revolutionary War, and so yeah, it's one of our. It's our oldest medal that we've ever given out. That surprised me.
yeah,
We have a lot more medals than you guys in general. I mean, I my wife is English, and so I've been to a
okay,
couple. She has friends that are in the military now, so I've been to a couple balls, and I wore my dress blues, and so I had like a big stack of like 13 or 14 medals over here, and everybody
yeah,
was always impressed, with this big stack of
yeah,
medals. All the Brits were, because usually they only have 3 or 4, and that's kind of like a guy that's done a lot. But we just have a lot of
yeah, yeah,
medals that you give out for. Like my first deployment, I got 6 or 7, and a lot of them are basically redundant. It's like you
yeah,
deployed during war, you did a sea deployment during war, you went to Iraq, you get a medal for being an Iraqi freedom. So you get like 6 or 7 medals just from deploying one time. But I think we
yeah,
just have more medals in general. But that is one that I would expect that you guys would have
yeah.
had.
Yeah. It's something. Yeah, like I said, we again, someone might want to correct me, but I believe by looking online, we don't have one. So when you was obviously when you left military in 2011, as you mentioned earlier, like a lot of your rehab, a lot of the rehab you were doing was around, you did a lot of rowing, and that brings
Mm-hmm.
me on to sort of how, as I mentioned in your introduction about winning a bronze medal at the London Paralympics.
Mm-hmm.
Like how what went from going and doing your rehab, doing the rowing as part of your rehab, to winning a bronze medal? How does that even how does that even come about?
So I first found out about the Paralympics and Paralympic rowing when I was probably 2 weeks in the hospital at Bethesda, and just working out was something that I wanted to, that I enjoyed doing, just working out in the gym in general. And so I was concerned that I wasn't going to be able to really do that anymore because I didn't know what life as a double above knee amputee was like. And so I just kind of started doing research, trying to figure out whether or not it was possible for me to continue to work out. And so that just kind of led me down a rabbit hole of, I think I Googled something like, disabled people working out. And then that led me to find out about the Paralympics. And then I found out about rowing in the Paralympics. And one of the reasons that I was interested in Paralympic rowing was because I just remembered that rowing on the Concept 2 was a heck of a workout
Mm,
before I was wounded. And so at the time, I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. I just kind of, cataloged it for later, put it aside
yeah,
because I had so much I had to do. I needed to learn how to walk again before I thought about going to the Paralympics or anything. But it just seemed something that could be interesting. Maybe I could learn how to work out, and then I could row as a way to work out, and then maybe I could use this opportunity, this injury, as an opportunity to go to the Paralympics and do something that very, very few people get to do. And so I just kind of logged that away for a while. And then once I recovered, a little less than a year later, I started looking into it again. And a lot of things had to fall into place for it. It just so happens that there was a place where I could learn how to row in Washington D.C. That did adaptive rowing, they called it at the time. And the guy that ran the program was a Navy veteran that did work at Walter Reed, and we were able to get a rowing machine in the clinic for me to use, and I would go out and train with him 3-4 times a week. And yeah, I took naturally to it, and then he also knew another female double above knee amputee that wanted to go to the Paralympics too, because that was a requirement for my rowing category. It's a mixed gender boat, and so I would
Yep.
have had to needed a partner. And he just so happened to know this really good, badass chick that was a double above knee amputee as well. And we met, we liked each other enough to be able to spend every day together. And we rode well together, and then so that kind of fell into place. And then we trained for 3 months and became the won national selection trials in order to become the national team for the United States. And then a couple months later, we went to Serbia to qualify the boat for the Paralympics because we hadn't qualified yet. And then after that, we trained some more, and then we showed up in London 2012 and won the bronze medal there.
It's quite a that's one thing, like as I said at the beginning, like that's brought me sort of like towards you, like I found interesting, obviously going from something quite down and negative, obviously having your accident, or not accident, but your incident, to going and winning a bronze medal at the Paralympics. That's just like, most people would only want to dream of doing something like that. Now, one thing, you came fourth at the World Championships as well the year after.
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, and so when I was doing a bit of research into it, I don't like admitting it, but unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, you beat us Brits by 200th of a second, apparently.
Yeah, I think it was 2/10
Yeah, so that's very close.
So it wasn't quite that close, but yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very close. Which it's something that I feel like is amazing. It's absolutely amazing what you've gone from and what you did. Now,
thank you.
Not a problem. So 2013, we're going to 2013 now. Obviously, you stepped out of the boat. You don't call it a boat, do you? What do you call it? Is it a boat?
Yeah, boat.
Call it a boat.
No, you can call it a boat. You can call it a skull. You can call it a shell.
Skull.
Yeah, but we'll just say boat.
You stepped out of the boat in 2013, or October 2013, which is when you started your across the states cycle. How did that come about? What was the change between rowing and going on a bike?
When I got wounded, I had been on a path towards brotherhood and selflessness and courage that the Marine Corps had set me to war, and so that's how I was. That's the path that I was on to those qualities and those traits that I wanted. And so when I got wounded, I got taken off that path by my injury because I wasn't really able to go to war anymore. And so after my recovery, my recovery was kind of all about gathering the tools that I was going to need in order to find that path again. And then when I retired, that was me setting forth on trying to find that new path. And rowing was the first, attempt to find that. And it was pretty early on, even in the 2012 season. As much as I was enjoying rowing, I knew that it wasn't going to be the activity that got me back to that path, because it was a mostly selfish endeavor. It was about going and winning medals and kind of glorifying yourself through that. And it was an important aspect of my recovery because it kind of was this really big moment in which I set out and I tried to accomplish something with my new body and my new circumstances, and I did, and I was successful. And so it kind of helped me regain my self-confidence and my self-reliance. But at the same time, yeah, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of meaning or purpose behind it, and I needed something that kind of pushed me physically and mentally, but then also had a purpose bigger than just that, bigger than me. And so during the 2013 season, I started thinking about other things I could do, because I knew that rowing wasn't going to be the thing, wasn't going to be the activity. And so I just remembered how long it took me to ride my bike across the country, or how long it took me to learn how to ride a bike again. And I started thinking, well, maybe I could push myself to my absolute physical and mental limits by being an endurance athlete and doing this really tough challenge, and raise money at the same time. for veteran charities, and so that's how I decided to do it. And I pretty much took off right after the rowing season. I didn't do a whole lot of training for it. All I really did was just make sure that my rowing prosthetics or my riding, my cycling prosthetics fit correctly. My bike was in good shape. I bought a U-Haul truck that had, or a U-Haul truck is like it's like a moving truck, a big box,
Yeah,
a wooden box on the back of a flatbed truck.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and you kind of loaded up with supplies. My little brother, who was 18 at the time, drove it for me, and we just drove up to Maine, and I just started. And I figured, the first quarter or half of the ride could be training for the second half, because I didn't have a timeline for it. I just wanted to make it, and so I
Mm.
didn't spend a whole lot of time riding in circles. I just wanted to apply all that mileage to the ride itself, and so we started that in October of 2013.
Yeah, yeah. It was. It's a pretty impressive feat of endurance.
Thanks.
Like for especially someone who's never, obviously cycling was something you were struggling, or not struggling with, but you just getting back in. It's like riding again from when you were a kid. Learning to ride again. So I can imagine. Like for me personally, obviously, I'm not a cyclist. I couldn't do. I'm sure I could do it, but it's like obviously it's all about the mental game, really.
Yeah.
The brain is only as capable as sorry, the body is only as capable as your brain, I'd say. From that event, I know you raised over $250,000 for like you said, for veteran charities. And I know
The
I
bike
know you
ride
have a
was
goal.
125,000.
Yeah, yeah. So I know I've read somewhere that you've got a sort of a figure in your head that you want to raise over. Is it over $1 million for the charities, for the veteran charities?
Yeah, I set a goal of $1 million for the bike ride just because I wanted to pick a big number, and so
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know anything about raising money or anything like that, so I just picked a big number, and so we got 125,000, which is awesome.
Mm.
But yeah, I'd like to raise $1 million by the time I die. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm pretty certain you will. That's kind of a given, really. Especially the stuff you've done, which again now will bring me on to, was it 2017? Yeah, end of
Hmm.
2017 is when you did your 31 marathons, 31 days, 31 cities.
Yeah,
Now, the first part of that, you actually did the first day of it. Was it in London?
yeah,
And that's how I actually watched a video. Was it some police officers, British police officers in London, like giving you like I don't know what they were doing. They were giving you advice or help or donating, and that's what
they were
actually
giving me a
brought me
plaque.
towards. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember seeing that a couple of months ago. I think it was a couple of months ago now, and that's why it struck an interest in you.
Hmm.
Now, obviously from there, obviously you flew back, obviously to the States, and then did the rest of it in the States, and also you did parts in Canada as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did one in Toronto.
Yeah, yeah. So for most able-bodied people, that would be considered an extreme sort of endurance event. Now,
Yeah.
obviously for yourself in the situation you're in, how because obviously you had a lot of people join you around the different cities that you went in. Now,
Hmm.
how obviously by that point, did you make a bit of a name for yourself, or was you still just robbed from the farm or whatever?
I mean, I would say that I certainly made a bigger name for myself than your average person, I suppose, in
Mm,
certain environments or certain circles. Um,
mm.
but I wouldn't say I'm famous by any means, any stretch of the word. I might be a little bit more well known than your average veteran in veteran circles.
Yeah.
Um, or maybe in running circles, people might have heard of me a little bit more often, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm particularly, well known in the absolute sense.
Yeah, so with the 31 marathons, 31 days, 31 cities, like how did that come about? Was that something you did a lot of planning for? I can imagine there was a lot of planning
Yeah,
towards
so
it.
that one I did a lot of planning and a lot of training, and the reason So when I finished the bike ride, I realized that there was still something missing from the formula that I had going on. I definitely I experienced courage and brotherhood on the bike ride with my little brother and having to ride up and down all these gigantic mountains in the wintertime.
Mm.
But what I realized was that the underlying purpose for the bike ride was still mostly about it was about me. It was about pushing myself and seeing what I was capable of and seeing what I could do. So it's still mostly about me. And so what I needed to do in order to be totally satisfied with something was have the overall purpose of it be one that was selfless. And so my mission, the reason that I wanted to do the marathons was to create a story that other veterans and civilians alike could use to help themselves when they struggled. And so that was the reason that I did it. And on top of that, it was a really tough challenge that was going to require courage and it was going to require brotherhood in the or camaraderie in the greater sense by having a team to help me do it and then having people come out and join me. And so that's how I figured I would create this story was by doing this challenge that most people would consider to be impossible or they'd really question whether or not it could be done. And I would get coverage for it because the media would hear about it and they wouldn't be able to help but not tell that story because it's such a double above the amputee running 31 back-to-back marathons. It's this thing that just kind of blows your mind, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's how I was going to get this story out there and create this story by doing this really tough challenge. And so that's the reason that I decided to do it, and that's how it came about. And I trained for a year and a half in order to do it, and during that time planned out the logistics. And my wife and my mom and a friend were my kind of team in my RV with me. I had volunteers that were at home, but they were the kind of the core team, and we would just kind of run a marathon, hop in the RV, drive to the next city, run a marathon, and just kind of follow that pattern around the country. And yeah, I mean, and somehow somehow we did it without any hiccups big enough to prevent us from making it to the next city.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I've seen videos of when you did it, and obviously, like I said, it is incredible, like what you've done. Like it's as I said before, like for someone in your situation, never mind someone who's able-bodied, then I think it's an amazing achievement. Now,
Thank you.
one thing, no, I like I said, it's like I said, I feel like it's a great story, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. Now, one thing I want to talk about is something about achieving things, and it's something that I found quite funny. And I don't know if you find it funny at all, but I've seen videos of you learning to skip. I was just wondering how your skipping's coming on.
You mean my jump and rope?
Sorry, yeah, you call it jump rope, so we call
Yeah,
it
skip and rope.
skipping in the UK.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
good. One of the things I wanted to do back in therapy, I don't know why. I think I was into CrossFit, and a lot of what they do in CrossFit is double unders with the jumping rope. And so that was
mm,
just something I'd been interested in. Never really tried it much. Um, so it was just something that I decided to see if I could figure out recently. And yeah, it's going okay. I haven't worked on it tons. I haven't gotten
yeah.
to the point where I can do a double under yet, but I can, sit there for a minute or two and do normal, single skip. So it's coming along pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Just last few things I want to talk about. I know obviously you got things to do today, so I don't want to keep you too long. So one thing I was going to ask you, if you could do all this again, knowing what you've been through and what you've done, would you do it all again, or would you change it?
No, I wouldn't change anything. I mean, in my vows to my wife on our wedding day, I said everything that led me to that point, was worth it, and I'd do it 1,000 times again to end up in that same position. And as much as I don't want to be a double above knee amputee, if I could have a surgery right now to give me my legs back, I'd probably do that. But I wouldn't want to change the experiences that I've had at this point because for all I know, if I hadn't stepped on that IED, 20 minutes later, I could have been killed by a sniper or, something like that. And it did give me this opportunity to create this story that I've just told you. And I think that story has probably helped. I know it's helped a lot of people because I get told
Yeah.
that all the time. And yeah, it's just kind of resulted in, I wouldn't want to give up, my son and my wife and all these experiences that I've had. And so stepping on an IED and going through that would, it's a price that I'm more than willing to pay.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's that. I can understand that. As I say, coming from a military background, I can understand. I've spoken, met people like yourself in the British military, and then they're the same. They'd say they do it all again to experience the things they've done after. Because
Yeah,
I think that's something.
I don't think I've ever met another amputee as a result of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that has given any other answer. So I think that's probably a common. You would think, as somebody that hasn't been through that kind of thing, that you would think about doing that. But I think the vast majority of the time, maybe not 100%, but the vast majority, people recognize that every tragedy presents opportunities and
Exactly.
opportunities to do some serious good in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I feel like when I speak to people, like I said, I love speaking to people like yourself, like military veterans and stuff like that, because I feel like I don't like using the word, but other civilians, in inverted commas, they would not understand the certain things that we've done and seen, things like that. Like you talk about brotherhood and courage and commitment to team and country and all that sort of stuff. I don't think people in normal society would understand what we've been through and what we've done. Obviously, bearing in mind we've done different things, but in
Mm-hmm.
similar places. So I feel there is always, like I said at the beginning, there's always like that connection, no matter where you're from in the world, between
Mm-hmm.
military veterans. And last thing I was going to ask you is if you could give advice to anyone, so for people that may be listening today, like what advice would you give to someone if, say, obviously, for instance, like we're going through that quite a bad time at the moment with COVID and stuff, and obviously the same for yourselves in the States. What advice would you give someone who's feeling a bit down or not feeling like they can do anything and just sat at home doing nothing?
Yeah. So what I say to people is there's two aspects of this that I think my story represents quite well. And the first one is what I call use the weight. And so as you go through life, you're going to have difficulties and challenges and stresses. And these stresses are a lot like having a barbell on your shoulders in the gym. It weighs you down. And in the gym, when you have that barbell on your shoulders, it's there whether you like it or not. It's on your shoulders. Um, and you kind of have two choices whether when it's on your shoulders, whether you can sit there and hold it is your first option and hold on to it for as long as you can and just resist that barbell on your shoulders, resist that weight and resist that stress or that difficulty. But you're going to realize pretty quickly that your energy is limited, it's finite. And when you're sitting there just resisting it, it's for as long as you can. That time isn't infinite either. And so eventually it's going to start to weigh you down more and more. And it's going to weigh you down until eventually you run out of energy and it topples you over. And the weight, the barbell, the stress is pinned across your back, and you're unable to get up. You're unable to do anything, help yourself, help anybody else. Um, or your other option when that weight's on your shoulders and that stress is presented to you, you're in that difficult situation, is to take the weight and strict press it over your head and then do it again and again and again and use that weight or use that stress. And every time you do, you adapt to it a little bit more and a little bit more. And you become stronger and stronger and more capable of handling that stress or that difficulty. And because you use that original stress, now you can handle bigger ones, bigger weights, and bigger stresses down the line until eventually it gets to a point where there's not enough weight in that gym or there's not a stress big enough in the world that you can't handle it. And you actually have to go out and you have to create ways to make your life difficult so that you can continue to get stronger and create these bigger stresses for yourself. And so that's what I would say is figure out how you can use your difficult situation to produce good in the world or produce opportunities for yourself. And that's kind of easier said than done. It's very easy to say that type of thing. So what I partner that with is the aspect of my life that has made everything that we've talked about possible is the selflessness that I developed in the Marine Corps. And so throughout my life, I've used my love and my desire to do what's best for the people that I care about in my life, that more than myself, to do things that most people would say are impossible. So whether it was, walking through minefields, which nobody wants to do, or running 31 marathons in 31 days, or recovering for my family, for my mom. I've been able to use that love for them to do what I had to do, to give myself the strength. And so what we all need to do when times get tough and when we're in difficult situations and it seems like it's hopeless is figure out what that thing is, or where that place is, or who that person is that we care about more than ourselves, that is depending on us to be successful in whatever we're trying to do, whether it's just getting out of bed in the morning, or whether it's finding a new job after you got laid off after during COVID-19, or whatever the case may be, recovering from your own tragedy. Find that person that needs you to be successful, that you care about and you love more than yourself, and that's where you get the strength to get yourself to rise to the occasion and do the things that you don't want to do and do the things that you feel like maybe you can't do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, honestly, like it's so good to hear people's stories like that. And like I said, I just want to say thank you, thanks for coming on, and I really appreciate it, taking the time. And it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure talking to you. It's really nice to speak to someone like yourself.
Thank you too, brother. And
No,
we're just going to go ahead and
not a
assume
problem.
that you're the guy that dispatched that helicopter to my site of injury. So thanks for doing that too.
Yeah, no problem. No, I could. I was in that general area at the time, so yeah, you never know. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So last thing, where can people find out what you've been up to or what you're doing in the future? What's the best place?
My social media is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Rob Jones Journey, and my website's
Cool.
robjonesjourney.com. So if anybody wants to get in touch, that's how you can do it.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I'll put it in the description. I'll make sure that people know that. So thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure. For people that want to keep in touch with myself, as I say, I'll put links in the description to my social medias. Please make sure you like the video, subscribe, comment, whatever it is you want to do. If I don't see you soon, I'll catch you on the flip side.